better to do. And I'ma never give a fuck, cause I'm better than you.
What's good? This is your boy DarkSkinTico. And this topic is going to be about borrowing trouble. It's a term used in, usually a lot of times it's used in the African American community, um, for all intents and purposes for the most part. But it's a term that, it applies to a lot of people across the board, not just the African American community. Borrowing trouble. Borrowing trouble is doing something needlessly that may have detriment to you for all intents and purposes. Everybody borrows trouble. The sad part about that, there's nobody alive that doesn't borrow trouble. Women borrow trouble more than men do. Men borrow trouble in hopes that they're not really borrowing trouble. And the sad part about that is when it comes down to it, it affects men greatly when they attempt to borrow trouble. And women pretty much overlook the fact that they've done everything wrong, even though they borrow trouble, and blame everybody else for them borrowing trouble. It's typically how that works. The problem with that is when you run into the problem of, the specifics in dating and, life. Borrowing trouble has one of the worst effects on women than they do men. Because at the end of the day, what a lot of people fail to realize is psychologically, and as far as humans are concerned, men can do things without women. And in fact, they actually don't really, women need men more than men need women. That's typically how that works. Because at the end of the day, the only thing in this day and age that women have to offer, especially if they don't have any other skills, is sex and the fact that they can have babies. That is it. If a man has no desire to have sex and or have a baby, or if the man has no desire to even remotely have a baby, sex is kind of sort of pointless at the end of the day, once you think about it. Because once you think about it, it is what it is. And the sad part about that, if a man doesn't even want to have a child, a woman has less power over that man who doesn't even want to have a child, or has less power over a man that, is in control of his hormones and or his body for all intents and purposes. The sad part about that is, at the end of the day, when it all comes down to it, it's one of those things where you kind of sort of have to wonder, what is it that the opposite sex has to offer me that I can't get from from showing up somewhere, or for some guys getting a doll, or a prostitute, or a girl from like something like the Bunny Ranch. What do women really have to offer me that that'll make it worth my while to want to even remotely be in a relationship with one? And you'll hear someone and say, well, companionship. Well, I can get a dog for that. So your point is, you'll hear women say something to the extent of, a lifelong partner. I can get a dog for that, and I can get multiple dogs for that, and then I can have my best friends, and I still have the camaraderie, and probably better camaraderie if I was in a relationship with a woman. That's typically how a lot of that shit works. The sad part about that is when people actually do stupid shit, they tend to not really understand fully what's going on, and they make a bunch of excuses, or they add a bunch of ad hominems to shit like this that really have nothing to do with the fact that you're not really even offering the shit that you claim you can offer a man. This is typically the problem that a lot of women run into, is they always put out here these claims that they're not willing to offer, or they can't offer, or they have no skills in offering a man for all intents and purposes. Like, you say companionship, but all you're doing is arguing. You say a lifelong partner, but you're cheating on a man and you're having a baby by another man. Kind of hard to have a lifelong partner when your child belongs to somebody else. That's typically how a lot of the shit works. The problem with that is when you run into those problems, people tend to always try to equate shit for no reason when in fact you shouldn't even be trying to equate certain things to certain things on top of the shit that you're actually doing already. The sad part about that is when you come down to it, you really have nothing to offer, but it's a bunch of ad hominems. And all those ad hominems really add up to nothing. It's basically like saying you can do this, that, and the other, and then you get the job and you can't even perform the job properly. Why would I want to hire you for this job if you can't do the job properly? That's typically a lot of the problems that a lot of women run into in this day and age, and it really sucks. However, the problem with that is the way women conduct themselves in this day and age that makes it so that it pretty much puts them out of the dating market or make men want to overlook them and shit like that. So what a lot of women tend to do in this day and age is they tend to use their sexuality instead of actually using some actual skills to get a man. Then they land a man. Then the man's looking at them like, okay, I was offered this, I was promised this, that, and the other, and I'm not even getting this, that, and the other. How fucked up is that? Like, think about that. You were offered all this stuff, and you're not even getting all this stuff. That's the fucked up shit about it. And one of the many things that I've noticed about women is the simple fact that they tend to want to always misrepresent themselves or overrepresent themselves or over embellish what they have to offer men, and when in fact they really don't have anything to really offer men. That's typically a lot of women in this day and age, and that's typically how they go about getting a man. They offer things that they really can't really offer for all intents and purposes, or they offer things that they think they can offer, but they really don't want to offer, or really don't want to bring to fruition, or can't even remotely bring to fruition. That's typically the nature of women. They pretty much get you, lull you into a false insecurity, and then they pretty much trap you. That's pretty much how it works. And then they promise you all these things that you're not willing to offer, but then they'll turn around and get mad at a man who's trying to run game on them, but they're doing the exact same thing that the man's doing. It's like, it's good for thee, it's good for me, but not for thee. So you're allowed to run game on a man, but a man is not allowed to run game on you. How is that even fair, and how is that even equal? Do you want to be upset with the man who ran game on you because you gave him some pussy, and now you're upset with him because he's not giving you all the things you offer, or he doesn't have all the things that he was saying he had when he was courting, when he was trying to chase you for some pussy, basically. And this is typically where a lot of women get hung up and have a lot of problems. It is what it is. So at the end of the day, it's one of those things where women get themselves into messes that they don't need to be in, and men get themselves into messes based on ad hominems and a lack of proof in a woman. Because the sad part about that, women will say they offer all this stuff, but when the game clock goes on, they don't have any of that stuff that they were offering in the beginning. Men will always offer the same damn thing across the board, unless they're like trying to spit game and they're just trying to smash for some pussy. But typically, it's usually what they have to offer is pretty much there. But unless they're trying to sound fancy for a one night stand, men typically only offer one. Men tend to always stay consistent on what they have to offer a woman, but women always go above and beyond what they have to offer a man. But then they never produce what they ever have to offer a man. It's typically how that works, which is pretty ironic. But today's topics for this, always barring trouble, is the lead up, the aftermath, the new victims, sensitive people, mob justice, outcomes, which is pretty much aftermath. What does it solve, victimhood mentality, projection, cancel culture, and doings. These are typically the topics that we're going to cover today in this lovely podcast. The funny thing about it is, when it comes down to it, it's one of those things where, like, you have to worry about what you're getting yourself into. Like I've already pretty much outlined, the aftermath is a girl offers you all this stuff, and you get in a relationship with that woman, and none of the stuff that she claims she's going to offer you at the beginning comes to fruition. This is typically a problem that a lot of men run into with a lot of women. Uh, or another one is they promise to be true and love you till you die, and then you find out somehow, some way later that you're raising somebody else's child, or you find out somehow, some way later that due to a medical incident or a medical thing, you find out that your blood type really doesn't match the child's, and you got some questions. And the only thing she can say is, oh well, maybe he takes after me, but your blood doesn't match either. No, that's a problem. It's one of those things where it's like, women would take things to the grave for all intents and purposes, whether you like it or not. If a woman is doing something wrong, if you don't have proof, or you don't have the necessary tools set up, which requires a lot of resources for no fucking reason, on top of the resources you're already dropping on the damn woman. The problem is, all those resources plus all the resources you're dropping on a woman cost you a shit ton of money. And the sad part about that is, and when it costs you a shit ton of money, the problem is now you're dropping money on her, and you're dropping money to make sure she's not cheating on you on a regular basis. So why drop double money for somebody you don't trust? This is typically why MGTOW's the way. This is typically why red pill's the way. This is typically why I always say something along the lines of that. Another thing when it comes down to it is, as I was describing in the aftermath, is you're raising somebody else's child. Things along the lines of that. This is typically something that a lot of men run into in this day and age, especially in Great Britain, when it's like, I think it's like 45% of men actually are raising somebody else's child. What, it's like 30 something percent of baby boomers are raising somebody else's child. That's actually pretty damn interesting and pretty damn sad at the same damn time. When in fact, why are we raising somebody else's child? Why do I have to raise somebody else's child? Why do I have to take responsibility for somebody else's child? It's typically like a good example of that in this day and age. That would be an equivalent, would be single mothers. They try to get into a new relationship. They want you to pay for their children. They're making you do something that they're not making the actual baby father do. Let me repeat that back one more time again for you if you missed that. When a single mother gets into a new relationship, they're making the new guy do what they're not making the baby father do. I don't think you heard me. When a single mother gets into a relationship with a new guy, she's literally making the new guy do what she's not making the baby father do. Let that shit sink in. So what you're left with is a bunch of women that want to present you this good thing, or pretend like they have everything going for them, or pretend like they have more to offer to you than a little bit, which really sucks. The sad part about that is what they're offering really doesn't amount to very much of a hill of beans, which really sucks once you think about it, because now you're being sold this lie that is a woman in her complete package, and in fact you're only getting a woman and her child. No other help around the house besides the fact that you're selling out all the money for her child that she's not making the actual father pay for. You're paying for what the father should pay for, which really sucks once you think about it. The sad part about that is this type of behavior and this type of mentality leads to victims, leads to new victims, or leads to a victimhood mentality. The new victims end up being single men who got saddled up with single mothers, which ends up being an overall problem for a lot of single men. The sad part about that is when you actually go about it in a certain way or a certain manner, you tend to run into a lot of other problems where you got women who are offering all these things only to take you for your money or only to take you for a fool. It's pretty much how a lot of this shit actually works. The sad part about that is when it comes down to it, you tend to wonder what's going on. And the thing that bothers you the most is the fact that you're doing all this stuff for a woman and she's doing nothing for you in return besides sex. You're offering her everything. She's offering you nothing or one thing. And some debt. Because if you're dating a single mother, you're going to have to take on the responsibilities of her children. It's typically how a lot of that shit works. On top of that, you kind of sort of run into another thing where you have a problem with a woman that's suffering from victimhood mentality. It's typically how that works. You become a victim, and she's always running around like she has a victimhood mentality. The problem with that is you're an actual victim. She's not a victim, so she's actually suffering from victimhood mentality for the fact that she believes that she's been done wrong by the last guy or a guy before that, and you're basically nothing more than the cleanup guy. That's all you are to her, is the cleanup guy. And that's typically how a lot of this shit works. And the sad part about that is a lot of guys fall for this and they end up in the biggest messes in the whole entire world, which really sucks once you think about it. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things where I would never wish that on my worst enemy. But at the same time, it's a learning experience if you learn from that situation. The sad part about that is not all men learn from that situation, and then they always end up in a hot mess or some ridiculous shit that you normally don't want to end up in. And for a man to end up that way, it sucks, and he's suffering. And when a man's suffering, he gets to his lowest point, and then he always wants to he always wants to he always wants to there's always the chance of him wanting to commit suicide for all intents and purposes. So when you run into that problem, you always end up wanting to commit suicide or harm yourself or self-harm as a man, because a man takes things to heart very hardly, and he always reflects on himself. And the sad part about that, we always talk about how women destroy men, but when a man starts reflecting on himself and what he did wrong, nobody's ever harder on a man than an actual man when it comes to him being a man. And that's typically one of the differences between men and women. A man so hard on himself, he's actually willing to off himself. A woman so hard on herself, she just puts on makeup or gets some plastic surgery. That's typically the fundamental difference between a man and a woman. A man so hard on himself, the thought of actually offing himself actually crosses his mind. A woman's hard on herself, so she decides to just put on some makeup and get some plastic surgery done, and she's perfectly fine, and she's moving right along. And half the time, she doesn't even think of that. She just realizes she has pussy, so it doesn't really matter anymore. It's typically how a lot of that shit actually works. Women always bounce back because they have pussy, and they know that, they can always trap a man or a simple jack man to basically make them pay for their bankroll their whole entire lifestyle for all intents and purposes. This is typically why you have a lot of sugar babies. They know that they know they can get their lifestyle bankrolled by somebody for all intents and purposes. The sad part about that is the things I've always found funny about that is, when they're getting older and they don't have any babies, and then they're starting to hit the wall, and they've been a sugar baby all their lives, and they get remarried And the sad part about that is now they're hitting a wall, and now they got kicked out of their sugar baby status, and now they're left with nothing because they didn't save any money, and they pretty much squandered it on Lord knows what. It's shit along the lines of that makes it so it's like pretty crazy and funny and unique for the fact that a man can't really pull that off. And even on the good example of that is you actually go to the sugar baby website, there's a shit ton of sugar daddies. They do offer sugar mamas, but there's only like 4 or 5 sugar mamas. Let that shit swirl around in your head. Let me repeat that one more time for you again. If you go to the sugar baby or sugar daddy or sugar mama's website, there's a myriad of sugar daddies. You go to the sugar mama side, there's about 4 or 5 sugar mamas. That's pretty much how that works. One of them's Asian, one of them's black, and 2 of them are white. That's typically how that works. One of them is a doctor, the other one's something else, and it's pretty much what it is. But they claim that they're sugar mamas. They're doctors, though. I mean, I don't think any. I think the one that makes the most money is probably the doctor. I want to say. I could be wrong, but a lot of the times, Eddie fell for it. Eddie married a dark triad. Poor guy. That sucks. That sucks very badly. Yeah, damn. But what a lot of people don't realize is when they actually end up with a woman who tends to want to sell them a dream or sell them a smoke or a pipe dream. The sad part about that is when they end up in these messes, they typically end up making it so that it's not really good for their overall health. And the sad part about that, these men get sold a dream. This is where barring trouble comes into play. A man didn't listen to his base instincts or didn't listen to all the red flags while he's being sold this pipe dream by a woman, and he ends up in a whole entire hot mess. It's sad, but it's so true. When this happens, the man is looking for all the benefits that he was offered. And at the end of the day, he gets none of the benefits he was ever offered, which is actually bad once you think about it. And the sad part about that is a lot of men get caught up in this lie. A lot of men get caught up in this lovely dream that they're sold by women. Typically, when you get into a relationship with a woman, especially a single mother, there's a whole myriad of problems that come with it. There's a whole myriad of false promises that come with it. At the end of the day, you're borrowing trouble. But like I said, nobody borrows trouble more than women do. Women tend to suffer from borrowing that trouble on the back end, whereas men suffer from that trouble on the front end when it comes down to it. The sad part about that is, what I mean by that is women only suffer at the end. Men suffer at the beginning or the middle. It's typically how it works. The sad part about that is when it actually continues on, the more it progresses, the more the shit actually gets out of hand. The longer you let it go on, the more you end up paying out to the woman, which really sucks. And the funny thing about that is there's a lot of men who get themselves into ridiculous situations where they don't even need to be in. And if they were thinking with their big head, they wouldn't be in that mess in the first place. Sad part about that, there's a lot of women who capitalize on men not thinking with their big head. Matter of fact, I'm willing to go as far as to say most, if not all women capitalize on men not thinking with their big head. That's typically how women get ahead in life. They can't have you thinking with your big head. This is typically why they always have their titties hanging out, or, they have their ass hanging out the bottom of shorts and shit like that, because they don't want you thinking with your big head, because they want you thinking with your little head so they can get you to do what you want you to do. Typically, women wear that stuff or do that shit just for attention, just so you don't think with your big head. They want you to think with your small head, so therefore they can get as much resources out of you with little effort as humanly possible. That's typically how women always win the game. They do shit like show off their titties or have their titties hanging out and have their ass popping out the bottom of their shorts or skirt for the hopes that you're not going to think with your big head, so you want to drop money on them. And typically is how it works. They do it for attention. Attention is a new currency for women. A woman can have the most handsomest guy in the world. She can be dealing with the guy with all the money in the world. She can be with the guy with all the money and the handsomeness in the world, all the cars, everything, all the fame. She still wants attention at the end of the day. No matter how you look at it, that's all she really wants is just attention. The sad part about that is you learn very quickly that women don't care what their significant others have to say. They only care what other people have to say about them. That's pretty much how that works. So even if you're in a relationship with a woman, she cares what other people think about her. No matter how much she claims she doesn't care how many people what people think about her, she always cares what people think about her. It's just the nature of the beast. So the sad part about that is when this shit actually goes down and all hell breaks loose, now the guy's left holding the debt bag. Why do you want to be that guy holding the debt bag? That's the problem with a lot of men in this day and age. And typically, when it happens, it sucks very badly. I will admit that. It does suck very badly. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things where you got to always, always, always think with your big head. Because if you don't, the minute you stop thinking with your big head is the minute you get used. The minute you get used is the minute you start suffering. And the minute you start suffering is the minute you start realizing that you fucked up. And typically how that works is you suffer greatly as a man, all because, her victimhood mentality. And the sad part about that, when it comes down to it, when y'all break up, you're always going to be the bad guy, and you're always going to project all the bullshit that they put on you onto you and say how bad you were or how bad you were. And the sad part about that is typically when a woman has society on her side or social construct on her side, you as a man are going to lose. And in all technicality, that was the original cancel culture. Because a woman takes the social setting with her out of the relationship, so now you're left with nothing. That's pretty much how all that shit works. Sad part about that is, if you're a man, you realize that being in a relationship with a single mother solves nothing. And when you're actually doing what you need to do as a man and you're trying to better yourself, it solves everything. Trying to always better yourself and improve upon yourself. It's pretty much how that works, and that's your best bet and best mode of operandi if you actually just improve upon yourself, and only worry about yourself, especially in the beginning years of your life. Stack your paper and, worry about all that extra shit later if you want to. 9 times out of 10, if you actually just stack your paper, you won't have to worry about any of that extra shit later at all. It's sad, but it's true. Now, one of the many things I've noticed is that there's a rise in sensitive men who respond, and it's done on purpose. It's done by design for men to be sensitive. That way they respond to women the way that women want men to respond to them. They want the men to respond to them for all intents and purposes. Because at the end of the day, when the shit's actually hitting the fan, it's one of those things where it's going to hurt your feelings. And it's going to be one of those things where it's like, because you're sensitive, you're easily to manipulate for all intents and purposes. That's the neat thing about a lot of the men who actually get into relationships. A man that's always looking for a relationship, or a man that's always looking for pussy, is always going to be easiest to manipulate. Sad part about that is now in this day and age, we have mob justice, where if you get some pussy and you don't call her back in a reasonable amount of time, or if she wakes up the next day and regrets it, they can pretty much Me Too the hell out of you, which really sucks. And that's a serious thing. The sad part about that is because of social media and the social structure and women actually running the social structure and this whole entire social setting, there's nothing you could do as a man to counteract that, because we found out very quickly in Canada how Canada responds to, a man with video proof. Now it's admissible in court because it represents a woman's sexual past. How hood is that? Sad part about that is at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, is it really worth it to be in a relationship? On top of that, you really have to ask yourself what it is about this person that makes it so that I'm willing to borrow this trouble. And is the trouble even worth it? And if the trouble's not worth it, then why am I putting myself into this problem, or putting myself into this possible debt and or possible downward spiral that's called life or relationships for this matter? Why am I putting myself into this mess and causing myself great heartache and pain? Why is it I'm willing to do this, but I'm not willing to work on myself and make myself a better version of myself? Why am I capitulating to women and giving up all my time and energy and efforts to women when I could be giving up all my time, efforts, and energy to starting a business, bettering myself, educating myself, saving up money for stocks and shit like that, just in case shit falls out? Or as we all like to say, just in case shit hits the fan. Why am I putting in all this effort to do stupid shit to only end up in the mess that I'm in? Typically how that feels. That's typically what it is. To answer your question, sleeping, traveling, and working out. To be honest with you, sleeping, traveling, and working out makes me feel good. And anything that I like accomplishing, like personal hobbies or, any accomplishments that I have in life, make me feel good. At the end of the day, you have to be able to discern when you're getting yourself into a trap, or you have to be able to discern when you're being tricked or deceived to some bullshit for all intents and purposes. The minute you can't deceive, I mean, the minute you can't discern anything, you have to take a step back and step outside yourself and take a 360 view and figure out what the hell is going on around you for you not to be able to see something what's going on with you for all intents and purposes, because women rely on you to be stupid all the time. When you're stupid, that's when they get you. It's basically like the Black Widow. Think of women like the Black Widow. They get you, they trap you, they kill you, and they feed you to the children that you help create. In this case, not only did they feed you to the children who you helped create, they feed you to society and grind up your bones and basically feed it to everybody else on the Ethernet. That's typically how a lot of this shit works. Sad part about that is what I was saying was travel, sleep, and working out is what I like, and also accomplishing many goals and shit like that. That's what I typically like to do. Um, but at the end of the day, never get caught up in a web of a woman. Never get caught up with the bullshit of women. Always be able to discern. Always discern when a woman's trying to do you wrong or trying to manipulate you for all its ends purposes. That's the sad part about that. Um, you have to worry about stuff like that. And the sad part about that is when it happens to you, you have to basically be able to correct yourself and better yourself and make it so that you don't suffer from this shit. The sad part about that is a lot of men suffer from this shit and they keep going with their head down like they're not suffering from this shit. And we live in a society where men are damn near or pretty much are or is disposable. So a man's plight never really matters in this modern society. And to answer your question on that, how do you get something you are? How do you get something you are? uh, so the irony of the day is at the end of the day, everything's a risk and a gamble. And the sad part about that is when you're willing to take that risk or gamble, you tend to start borrowing trouble or problems that you really don't want or want to have. That's typically how that works. When you start borrowing troubles that you don't want or want to have, you start running into major problems that are not necessary for you to run into. When you start doing that, it becomes something that is a bit of a beginning of the end of your time in that relationship or your time as a productive man because at the end of the day they basically want to take away all your resources and all the things that you had to offer them. They basically want to have it for themselves. Even the women who are actually going to school or are educated or who are educated even want to take away your shit on top of the shit that they're already getting. Like, let that shit sink in. Sad part about that, women don't want to work forever. They just want to work until they would like to not work anymore and be able to live off of you. This is typically where a lot of the overall problems come from. And this is typically where all the typically where all the typically the aftermath of men when it all goes down and it sucks. Sad part about that is when it all goes down and sucks, men are left holding the bag, men are left holding the debt bag, and that's the aftermath. And now they're paying for her, now they're paying for children that, that didn't even belong to them. Now they're paying for children that they can't even see or shit along the lines of that. So now the man's in desperate despair and now he wants to off himself, which ends up being a even worse aftermath of all the shit. Because at the end of the day, as far as the government's concerned, men are disposable. They've always been disposable since the beginning of time. So why worry about a man when you got a bunch of women? Sad part about that is, at the end of the day, it's very hard to defend a country when you don't have any men to defend the country. That's pretty much how it works. How do you defend a country with no men to defend the country? Because I don't see women running out there and getting in tanks to try to defend their own country. Only thing that they would defend is probably the next iPhone sale or the next Fendi bag sale or the next sale at, Neiman Marcus or something like that. That's the only thing they're going to defend. They're not going to defend their country. So at the end of the day, that's typically how a lot of this shit works. And you always get yourself into a mess and a bind that you really don't want to be in. The irony to it is, what did it solve? What did you get from it? And what did you learn from it? If you learned nothing from it, you fucked up as a man. Because you should always, everything you do should be a learning experience. And if it's not a learning experience, then you fucked up as a man. That's typically how that shit works. So if you're going to fuck up as a man, you better be damn sure willing to actually learn something from it. If you're willing to put yourself in a fire, you better be damn sure willing to actually learn something from that experience. Because if you're not willing to learn something from that experience, you're doomed to repeat yourself like history. That's pretty much how that works. Why are you going to repeat? Why are you going to repeat yourself? Why are you going to be doomed to repeat yourself like history, when in fact you can improve upon yourself and make yourself a better version of yourself? The problem that a lot of men have is they focus so much on women that they never focus on themselves. Typically, all we want men to do is focus on themselves and not really ever sway from ever, improving ourselves. Like, personally, I don't care if you're in a relationship. I still want you to improve yourself. That way, you still have your value when you leave the relationship, and it makes a woman think twice about, probably leaving your ass because, you're in good shape and you're still handsome and you still look good and other women want you. It makes a woman think twice about actually leaving you for the fact that you still have some value. This is typically why women tend to always fatten up their men or try to make them stop doing stuff or try to make them spend more time at home. So they won't always be better in themselves or always be attractive to other women. This is typically why women always try to, take men out of their hobbies or take men out of their workout routine or take men out of their normal schedule when they met them, because they know that's how they met them. Now they're worried about another woman trying to come in and swoop in and take your shit. So the sad part about that is that's a form of mate guarding that a lot of men don't really understand when they get you to not when they get you to stop doing all your hobbies or your workout routine, or they want you always home. Basically they want you home so you can have minimum face time in front of another woman that might find you attractive. It's nothing more than a big mate guarding strategy. That's all she's really doing. Because by keeping you getting fat or keeping you lazy, she's lowering your value while she's increasing her value to probably monkey branch out of the relationship. So the more you up your value and stay independent from her, the more your value goes up and the more it actually increases in stock as hers actually starts dropping. Less likely she's actually going to think to like you actually jump ship for all intents and purposes. And if she does jump ship, more likely she's going to want to come back. And you never let a woman back in the door once she leaves the door. Because I've always believed, don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. Pretty much what it is. So that's the podcast for today. Everybody have a blessed day and be good to themselves and stay the hell away from women. Just stay the hell away from women, especially single mothers. If you're not willing to borrow trouble, stay the hell away from women. If you're willing to borrow trouble, please learn from it. Learn everything you possibly can from it. Don't leave no stone unturned if you're going to deal with a woman and borrow trouble. Leave no stone unturned. Always learn something from any experience that you experience in life. Because you're not willing to do that, you're going to be in a world of hurt. If you're going to be in a world of hurt, at least learn something from it. At least learn something from it. Because at that point in time, you're just going to be a pointless little man, which really sucks. That learned nothing. And you're going to put yourself back in the fire again, and you're going to repeat the shit, rinse, repeat all over again. All the time. So always learn from your mistakes. Always learn from every experience that you have in life. That's typically why you have experiences in life to learn from. Even if it's bad, learn from it. Even if it's good, learn from it. So, yeah, learn from it. That's all I want you to do is learn from it if you're going to do it. And like America said, vet. But y'all have a good one and have a good rest of your day. And I enjoyed my time in this podcast. Y'all have a good one.
Oh, man.